Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely wild, an extraordinary daily practice and the deeply personal, frankly almost unbelievable transformations that our source material says came with it. We're looking closely at what happens when individuals commit to repeating a single phrase 30,000 times in a single day. Let's dive right in. It's a pretty staggering question, right? I mean, what actually happens to your mind, your body, and even your life circumstances when a single, specific phrase is repeated 30,000 times a day? Well, this is exactly what we're going to answer today by looking at two deeply personal, highly detailed case studies straight from our source material. And these accounts describe some truly profound shifts. We're talking going from total financial ruin to physical healing. But before we get into the results, we really need to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this number, 30,000. To say literally anything that many times a day requires near constant, nonstop repetition. You're repeating it in the morning, all throughout your workday, and deep into the night. Now, the specific phrase being repeated here is Istighfar, which means seeking forgiveness. It's a massive volume of words that requires incredible dedication, and understanding that sheer effort is absolutely crucial for understanding the transformations we're about to discuss.
Section 1. The Power of Istighfar, Moving from Ritual to Transformation.
So let's quickly define our core term here. Istighfar is the Islamic practice of seeking forgiveness from God. Now, the source material presents a very specific theological premise. It claims that for this practice to actually yield real-world changes, it has to move way beyond just an empty ritual. The source describes how people often go through the motions of worship, right? But then they continue in their negative habits, maybe it's gossip, maybe it's financial misdeeds, and then they wonder why they feel totally stuck in life. I mean, if you've ever tried to build a brand new habit while stubbornly clinging to a bad one, you know exactly the kind of friction that causes. The core argument in our source is that true istighfar requires a complete, utter departure from those sins, effectively serving as this powerful tool for removing personal blockages and unlocking divine relief.
Moving on to Section 2. Overcoming Hurdles in Saudi Arabia. A man drowning in debt and delays.
Our first source account looks at a Sudanese man living in Saudi Arabia whose life was honestly just incredibly tangled up. He was dealing with crushing debt, he was having severe bureaucratic disputes with his kafil, or his sponsor, and he was facing these agonizing roadblocks just trying to marry the woman he loved. But after committing to this massive daily repetition of istighfar, the shift he reported was profound. He experienced this sudden, deep peace. He stated that he literally just stopped carrying the anxiety of all these unresolved issues, completely letting go of that heavy emotional burden. So how exactly did he get there? Well, according to the source, around Ramadan of the year referenced as 2026, he kicked things off with 13,000 repetitions a day, mostly while driving to Mecca. Then, post-Ramadan, he escalated dramatically. He pushed past the sheer physical fatigue of his long shifts as a driver to reach between 30,000 and 45,000 repetitions daily. That is huge. And by the month of Zulhijjah, the source notes he combined this staggering number with daily fasting and an intense spiritual focus to seek God, which meant completely halting his past habits of idle gossip. Then we hit this absolute turning point. It happened on the very day he first reached that 30,000 mark. He had specifically prayed that if his massive effort in istighfar was on the right path, he'd see a sign, specifically through rainfall. The source quotes his poignant realization, "An unexpected rain falling just for me." As he was driving, a localized, steady rain actually began to fall. He interpreted this highly specific, very unusual weather event as a direct, personal validation of his monumental spiritual effort. All right, let's shift gears entirely and look at Section 3, a physical healing in Jordan, the painful path to recovery. This second account is drastically different. We're looking at a woman in Jordan who was experiencing severe, unexplained physical distress. She started off with 1,000 repetitions of istighfar and tawheed, the declaration of faith. But then she deliberately pushed herself past that 30,000 threshold. And rather than feeling immediate peace, she actually entered what is described as a brutal, painful physical detox phase. Yet, by pushing through this immense difficulty, she reported waking up the very next morning completely healed. Her description of hitting that 30,000 threshold is just incredibly visceral. She actually described the physical reaction as, quote, like something being pulled out from under my nails, worse than my 3 C-section surgeries. She reported this terrifying sensation of her bones feeling like they were breaking, severe head and back pain, and this lingering feeling like something trapped inside her was being forcibly pulled out.
It is a stunningly intense description of physical agony, and she attributed it directly to the spiritual practice finally taking effect on her body. But the contrast here is literally night and day. At the absolute peak of her agony, she was completely bedridden. She was crying on the floor in sheer pain, unable to even sit in a chair to pray. But by sunrise the very next morning, the pain just vanished entirely. She woke up with zero pain, moving freely, making her morning tea, and feeling utterly reborn. She was in total disbelief at the sudden and absolute relief that followed that harrowing night.
Which brings us to Section 4, the secret of 30,000. Why this specific number? So why 30,000? Why not 10,000 or 50,000? Well, according to the source material's main host, Muhammad Hijazi, this isn't just some random arbitrary target. A threshold of 30,000 demands constant, all-consuming dedication. Physically speaking, it occupies your tongue and your mind so completely that it actually starves out negative habits. You literally don't have the time for idle gossip, complaining, or sin. It serves as this profound demonstration of commitment. Plus, Hijazi notes in the source that this specific massive volume has been repeatedly linked in these accounts to sudden rainfall and the unblocking of abundance. It effectively starves out the negative just to make room for the positive. Finally, let's look at Section 5, Purifying Intentions for Success, Guidelines from the Source. You see, the source material absolutely doesn't present these stories as some sort of magic trick. It actually provides strict guidelines to keep you from getting totally disillusioned. Hijazi's core advice here is to never tie this massive act of worship exclusively to a specific worldly outcome, like, say, marrying a certain person or getting a specific car. Because if you do, and that result gets delayed, you're probably going to quit. You have to trust the delayed process. He also highly advises consistently praying Istighfar, which is a specific prayer seeking divine guidance, and accompanying this practice with the reading of Surah al-Baqarah to maintain a purified environment. And this mindset is really beautifully captured in the heart of the Istikhara prayer. If there is good in it, God will facilitate it. If not, God will turn it away. The source emphasizes that you might intensely desire something, just like the man in our first story who wanted to marry a specific woman, but you don't actually know if it's going to bring you long-term happiness or misery. The practice of 30,000 Istighfar, when combined with this mindset, is really about seeking ultimate objective good, rather than just blindly trying to force your own personal desires into reality. So we're going to wrap up the explainer today with a pretty powerful question. Are we seeking the gift or the giver? These source accounts of 30,000 daily repetitions highlight a really extraordinary level of human endurance and spiritual commitment. But the ultimate takeaway from the source material is all about intention. When we dedicate ourselves so entirely to a practice like this, are we just trying to extract a specific worldly reward, or are we genuinely seeking to transform ourselves at the core? It's a thought-provoking perspective on the true nature of devotion and the profound, sometimes completely surprising ways it can manifest in the real world. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.